In my last video, we talked about how triggers are invitations to heal. But here is what I didn't tell you. If you're a mother, your children aren't just random triggers. They're perfectly designed healers sent to activate the exact wounds you've spent a lifetime avoiding. That child who won't listen, the one who has meltdowns at the worst possible moments, the one whose needs feel overwhelming, they're not breaking you. They're breaking you open. And today, we're going to talk about why this is the most sacred work you'll ever do. Welcome back. I'm Rima. And if you watched my last video about embracing triggers, you know we're going deep here. We're talking about the kind of self-awareness that doesn't just change your day, it changes your lineage. Because here is what I've discovered working with hundreds of moms. The children who trigger us most are often the ones giving us our greatest opportunities to heal generational trauma. And when we understand this, everything changes. Not just for us, but for generations to come. Let's start with something that might be hard to hear, but it's essential. Most of us are parenting from wounds we don't even know we have. Maybe your mother was physically there, but emotionally unavailable, always busy, always stressed, never quite able to see you. Maybe your father was absent or present, but critical, or loving, but overwhelmed by his own pain. Maybe you grew up walking on eggshells or feeling responsible for everyone else's emotions or learning that your needs were too much. Here is what I want you to understand. Your parents weren't failing you on purpose. They were giving you exactly what they had received or what they were capable of giving from their own wounded places. A parent who was neglected as a child doesn't magically know how to provide emotional nourishment. A parent who was criticized doesn't automatically know how to offer unconditional acceptance. This isn't about blaming or making excuses. It's about understanding the cycle so we can break it. Now, here is where it gets really profound. Your children are not random. The way they trigger you, the specific behaviors that send you over the edge, the particular needs they have that feel overwhelming, none of this is coincidence. That child who seems to need constant attention, they might be reflecting back the attention you never received. The child who has big emotions you don't know how to handle, they're showing you the emotions you learned to suppress. The child whose strong will frustrates you, they're demonstrating the autonomy you were never allowed to express. Our children come through us with exactly the gifts and challenges needed to surface our deepest wounds. They're not doing this to torture us, they're doing it to free us. They're saying, Mom, there is something buried in you that's been running your life, and it's time to heal it. It's time to feel it and move through it. Your triggers around your children aren't signs that you're failing as a mother. They're signs that you have an opportunity to heal something that's been waiting your whole life to be felt. This brings us to perhaps the most important conversation we have as mothers, our responsibility to break generational cycles. When you find yourself yelling at your child the way your mother yelled at you, when you shut down emotionally the way your father did, when you feel overwhelmed by their needs the way your parents seemed overwhelmed by yours, these are not character flaws. These are learned patterns that you inherited, and now you have the conscious choice to do something different. But here is the key. You can't break what you can't see, and you can't heal what you won't feel. This means that when your child triggers that familiar rage, that overwhelming feeling of, I can't handle this. That urge to shut down or lash out, instead of pushing it away or acting it out, you pause. You get curious. You ask, how old do I feel right now? What wound is this touching? What part of my inner child needs attention? Here is something incredible about being an adult. You now have the capacity to feel and process emotions that would have overwhelmed you as a child. That grief you couldn't feel when your parents divorced. That anger you couldn't express when you were dismissed. That loneliness you had to bury when you were left to comfort yourself. You can feel it now. You're strong enough now. When your child's behavior brings up that familiar pain, the feeling of being unseen, unheard, or too much, don't run from it. Breathe into it. Get quiet with it. Let yourself feel what your 5-year-old or 10-year-old self couldn't handle. This isn't about wallowing or staying stuck in old pain. It's about finally letting that trapped energy move through you so it stops unconsciously directing your parenting. And here's what happens when you do this brave work. On the other side of that pain is an expanded capacity to love. When you can hold your own difficult emotions with compassion, you can hold your child's difficult emotions with compassion. When you stop being afraid of your own feelings, you stop being afraid of theirs. Something beautiful happens when we do this deep healing work. We naturally begin to forgive our own parents. Not because what they did was okay, but because we finally understand that they truly couldn't give what they didn't have. That emotionally unavailable mother, she was probably protecting herself from pain she learned was too dangerous to feel. That critical father, he was likely repeating the only parenting script he knew. This understanding doesn't excuse harmful behavior, but it releases us from the prison of resentment. And that release, it frees up enormous amounts of energy that were tied up in old anger, energy that can now be channeled into conscious, loving parenting. When you can see your parents as wounded children doing their best with broken tools, forgiveness becomes natural. And when you forgive, you're not just freeing yourself, you're freeing your children from carrying your unfinished emotional business. So how do we actually do this work? I know you're thinking, I barely have time to shower, let alone analyze my childhood wounds. So let me give you something simpler but infinitely more powerful. When your child triggers you and you feel that familiar surge of anger, overwhelm, or helplessness, don't try to figure it out. Don't ask yourself a bunch of questions. Instead, just stare at the emotion. What I mean by staring is this. Notice without any thoughts exactly what is happening in your body. Where do you feel the heat, the tension, the constriction? Just observe it like you're watching clouds pass by. But here is the crucial part. Don't just observe. Welcome that emotion with complete unconditional love. Yes, even rage, even the overwhelm, even the feeling of being a terrible mother. Welcome it like you would welcome a hurt child coming to you for comfort, because that's exactly what it is, a hurt part of you that's been waiting your whole life to be loved instead of pushed away. Hold this loving awareness long enough without acting on the emotion, and something remarkable happens. That emotion that felt like a monster when you were resisting it begins to dissolve when you welcome it with open arms. Negative emotions simply cannot survive in the presence of unconditional love. They transform when they're met with acceptance instead of resistance. When you do this, you're giving yourself the gift of finally feeling what you couldn't feel as a child, but now with the love and acceptance that was missing then. You're completing an incomplete emotional experience that's been running your life from the shadows, and that's enough. That simple act of lovingly witnessing is profound healing. Of course, you can still say to your children, "Mommy is feeling some strong emotions right now and needs a moment to let them move through." But the work is in the feeling and the loving, not the thinking. When you do this work, you're not just changing your life, you're changing your family's entire trajectory. The patterns that have been passed through generations can stop with you. The wounds that have been inherited can finally heal. Your children won't have to spend their adult lives in therapy processing the same things you're processing now. They'll know you're safe. They'll know they're safe to feel their feelings because they've watched you feel yours. They'll know they're worthy of love because they've received unconditional acceptance. This is the most profound gift we can give our children. Not perfect parenting, but conscious parenting. Not the absence of triggers, but the willingness to be transformed by them. So this week, I challenge you, when your child triggers you, resist the urge to immediately react or even to analyze. Instead, just stare at what you're feeling. Notice it in your body. Hold it without judgment, without trying to fix it or understand it. Let that emotion that was too big for you to feel as a child finally move through your adult body. Trust that this simple act of witnessing is enough to break generational patterns. Remember, every trigger is a doorway, not just to your own healing, but to your family's liberation. Every difficult emotion you choose to feel and process is energy that no longer needs to be passed down to your children. You're not just raising children, you're raising the future. You're healing the past. And every conscious choice you make in your most triggered moments is an act of love that ripples forward and backward through your entire lineage. If you're ready to dive deeper into this generational healing work, let's connect. Check the description for ways we can work together on breaking cycles and creating the family dynamic you're always dreamed of. See you in the next video, where we'll continue this journey of conscious transformation. And if you haven't done it yet, please subscribe and like. Your support is literally what allows me to expand this channel and reach more families who need this healing work.